Hello, welcome to another exciting episode of Digital Data Podcast, where we explore the intersection of technology, human rights, and journalism. And we are still continuing with our podcast series on digital ID system. In this episode, we are diving into the transformative power of digital ID system, especially through the lens of inclusivity for marginalized communities across the African continent. As Africa continues to embrace digital transformation, the African Union's Agenda 2063 and the African Continental Free Trade Area have set bold goals to promote economic integration and social cohesion. But how do we ensure this initiative leave no one behind, especially those in underdeserved and marginalized community? In this episode, we unpack the benefits of a digital ID in promoting equitable access to services, jobs, and opportunities, particularly for rural population, women, refugees, and other historically excluded groups. This podcast has been made possible by the African Union Media Fellowship, which is implemented by the African Union through the Information and Communication Directorate, supported by GIZ on behalf of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. I'm your host, Cecilia Maundu, a broadcast journalist, a digital security expert, and an African Union Media Fellow from Kenya. Alan, welcome to Digital Data Podcast. The floor is yours. Kindly introduce yourself and the kind of work that you do.
I'm Simple Alan Chibozi, and I head legal and programs at Unwanted Witness, a civil society organization, pretty much working around people, right? We are based in Uganda, but work beyond the borders of Uganda and work across Africa. We've been around for close to 13 years.
Alan, I will start by asking you, what kind of work have you done when it comes to the issue of digital IDs?
We've done a lot of research ever since the national ID systems in Uganda were at the system model was launched in 2014. We've tried to do research to unearth some of the exclusion tendencies of the system, but with the intention and aim of streamlining that system so it's inclusive for all groups, but also respects human rights and the dignity of Ugandans as we move towards identification of citizens, which we believe is a good thing. Identification is a good thing. It's quicker service delivery, but if done in a manner that is not thorough, it has tendencies of excluding many and disenfranchising many Ugandans. So we've been at the forefront doing research, but also a lot of advocacy as a result of the research that we've produced. We've engaged the powers that be, the regulators. Some of our recommendations have been picked and others have not yet been. It's a journey and we are still at it.
Thank you for that, Alan. And now that brings me to my first question. For the benefit of our audience, what are the benefits of a digital ID?
Digital IDs has numerous benefits. In promoting good governance, comes in very handy, but only done in a way that is inclusive, transparent, and efficient. It will promote good governance. Things like efficient service delivery, it streamlines access to public services. It ensures that individuals are accurately identified. It reduces fraud, duplication, but also reduces corruption in a manner unprecedented because then government knows who they are planning for. If done very well, there can be issues of planning for people that are not non-existent, which is something that is so rampant in African governments. We've seen it in Uganda, where the Prime Minister's office, exaggerates the number of refugees, only to do a recount, and there are less refugees that they've always been catering.
And I think the situation is also across board. Same with the famous Dadaab refugee camp in Kenya.
Yeah, so efficient service delivery, but also transparency and accountability.
That sends me to my next question. How can African countries like Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania develop policies that ensure digital ID systems are secure, transparent, because you talked about there must be robust measures for it to be able to work. So how can digital ID systems be secure, transparent, and inclusive while aligning both the African Union Digital Transformation Strategy and the African Charter of Human Rights and People's Rights?
No, I think the question is having a political will. There is no way around it because all these charters, these governments have signed to be part of it, They have endorsed them, and therein are recommendations and guidelines on how best, countries can adopt policies that can, ensure inclusivity, that can ensure, good governance, So I think what African governments need to do, and I would give an example, Uganda and the East African countries, most of their digital laws or cyber laws are more restrictive than enabling. Okay, many of them look at these digital laws or cyber laws as tools to hold them into power, to stifle freedom of expression. I would rather think that an enabling legal framework, okay, having data protection laws that are robust across all, having interoperability standards, establishing harmonized technical and operational standards to enable cross-border compatibility of data, laws that actually protect digital rights more than stifle, because we've seen governments actually prosecute people more than they actually use these laws to enable. Okay, so also policies, government policies that enable, more investment in the use of digital technologies, because we've seen over and over, East African governments, for example, they give less budget to ICT ministries and departments. Less money is
Of political goodwill comes in.
Yeah, exactly. Political goodwill. If you know that ICT actually is an engine for transformation across board, because you see, you can't talk of digital rights if people have no access to internet. You can't talk of digital rights if people have expensive data bundles. You can't talk of digital rights if digital technologies that people would use to enjoy the digital rights are expensive. Okay, so once you have less taxes and more accessibility of internet, more penetration of internet, we can talk of digital rights, a meaningful digital rights, and policies should speak to that. Then further, policies should not be so restrictive. When you put the digital technologies, don't restrict people from using them. In Uganda, Facebook has been blocked for now coming to 5 years. Can you imagine? So you can't speak of digital rights when Facebook is blocked. What I say? During the elections, now common norm that African governments switch off internet. I should give kudos to Kenya for them. During the rails, they had Ruto must go. Ruto didn't switch off internet. I think that was a good move. That was a good precedent set by Ruto to other African governments. If that was in Uganda or Ethiopia or Rwanda, internet would be off. During elections, they don't even care what other benefits internet brings. Like ATM. In Uganda, internet was switched off, and people could not even access ATM money. People could not make calls. Radio stations could not broadcast. So for them, as long as it serves their purpose, they will switch off without due regard to the benefits of. So the policies you're talking about should actually put all that into consideration. We should have policies that have favorable tax regimes. We should have policies that encourage, more investment in the infrastructure. We should have policies that actually help reduce the price of internet, improve the penetration of internet. But also policies that are not so restrictive, that are enabling and encouraging for people to use it. Because in Uganda, other countries, is now use of social media to express yourself. It's now a threat. You don't know who will come for you. So it's more of a threat than a platform that excites and amplifies the other opportunities that bring about enjoyment of digital rights.
There's something that you said, they are more restrictive than enabling.
Yeah.
And that brings me to my other question. How can African countries design digital ID systems that are both technologically advanced and accessible to all citizens? You see, we are also talking about leaving no one behind. So how can they design digital ID systems that are both technologically advanced and accessible to all citizens, including those without formal documentation or access to advanced technology?
Remember, we live in Africa, where the majority of our population lives in the rural areas.
They can use low-tech solutions for accessibility, for their ID systems, such as USSD systems. Okay, these enable interaction with digital ID systems via basic feature phones. Feature phones, these that are not supposed, smartphones. So this ensures access to those without smartphones and internet. So the system should also have the offline functionality. These design systems that can operate offline and synchronize with central databases without connectivity, but also they can also subsidize or simplify enrollment costs. This is a fight we are still fighting in Uganda. enrollment costs for national ID replacement is very high. $13 for a country where average person lives less than $1 a day. How can you then, make the ID very expensive? So when I provide free or low cost enrollment.
And that still goes back to the issue of political goodwill.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So they can also adopt multimodal enrollment processes, such as, biometric data. They can use diverse biometric options such as fingerprints, iris scans, financial, facial recognition to accommodate, individuals with unique physical attributes. This has been adopted in Uganda, okay, where they can now use your iris for those who have no fingers, the lame people, But also, lastly, I think they can leverage community validations. They can partner with local leaders, elders, or community, to verify individuals' identity through social proof or bypassing the need for formal documentation. So I think some of these can be very handy in developing or designing digital ID systems that are both technological and inclusive. So inclusive and technologically mindful approaches usually ensure that digital ID systems in Africa can be both advanced and accessible and empowering all citizens while addressing the need for the unique challenges of the region.
I like the issue of inclusivity when we bring in people with disability, and also making sure that the people in the rural areas, when you talk about making sure that data is affordable, making sure people in the rural areas can be able to afford to get these services. So cycling back to your point on democracy, how can digital ID systems support the realization of Agenda 2063 vision of an Africa of good governance, democracy, and respect for human rights?
Digital ID systems really play a pivotal role in supporting the realization of Agenda 2063 by enabling inclusive, transparent, and efficient governance, promoting good governance, strengthening democracy, upholding human rights. For me, those are very important things. If you want an ID system that will support democracy, then the data input should be accurate. The use of personal data, it should be privacy safeguard. Many African governments have included the use of biometrics and machines in registering voters in the entire electoral process. So, and usually starts with the collection of personal identification information. Okay, so you ought to have accurate information. You ought to have inbuilt policies that have privacy safeguards in them. Who handles that data when it's collected? Who is in charge of that machine? Where is the server? In the Kenyan elections, there was a big argument about the server. Who has access to the server? Where is the server located? And all that.
Yes.
So this transparency maintains the integrity of an electoral process, thereby increasing the democratic practices and enhancing democracy all through the electoral processes.
A quick question when it comes to the issue of transparency, because one of the coming out very clear, a lot of people don't understand exactly what is a digital ID.
A quick question concerning the issue of civic education on the issue of digital IDs. What is coming out clear through research is that a lot of governments have not educated their citizens on what exactly is a digital ID. What are the benefits? What is your take on that?
No, certainly countries have not done enough on that, but it's deliberate, Cecilia. When the citizenry are not informed, then government goes away with a lot of things, okay? So by removing civic education, not much has been done by governments. It's deliberate because then they can manipulate the information they use. People don't know how data is transferred, who uses the data, how it's manipulated, and all that. And only those who are in the state or who use the state have access to such data. So the less people know, the better for those in government, which I think is very unfortunate. Very unfortunate. And when tables turn, it's usually those in government that actually are at the loss. Okay, I feel it's very unfortunate. There should be enough and deliberate civil education, civic education. In Uganda, yesterday they started registration of voters. and people are renewing their registers, their names in the register. Others are registering, others are updating their details, and then others are rushing to get national IDs because of that national ID in Uganda. Voting might be a big problem. But again, few people know that the registers are open. They deliberately do limited public awareness. There's a kind of awareness that if things go south, they will pull out a newspaper and claim they did an announcement. But how many people actually read newspapers? Okay, how many people do read newspapers? So the effort put into to improve the civic education and awareness of people is really limited, but it's deliberate. Don't even be fooled. It's deliberate by those in power. It's part of the game to rig election.
Alan, you talked about investment. How can digital ID system contribute to the formalization of businesses, particularly SMEs, who are the majority in Africa, and help them integrate the digital economy under the Africa Free Trade Framework?
So digital IDs, the systems can significantly contribute to the formalization of big businesses, particularly SMEs, and facilitate their integration into digital economy. And this is how some of the things that digital ID can help into this process. Streamlining business registration and licensing. You see, digital ID for entrepreneurs provides variable, credentials for business owners. When you can't, these days, it's now more evident that you can't start business without personal data. I don't think of any business without personal data. If you own personal data, then it's the beginning of your business. Without these details on who you're marketing to, who you're serving, where they are located, what ages they are, and all that, this is all information for digital ID. And if you have a streamlined digital ID system which is accurate, then it benefits those business owners. Okay, well, it's faster. It's usually more faster and more accessible, in terms of business registration processes. But also it reduces bureaucracy. With digital ID, SMEs can register their business online, reducing delays and costs associated with the manual processes. There is also, it facilitates cross-border trade. When you have an harmonized digital identity framework across, the Africa Free Trade areas, member states, this helps businesses meet the regulatory requirements of cross-border trade more efficiently. So, sorry.
This means it will be a boost to the Africa Free Trade Continental Agreement, if done in the right manner.
If done in the right manner, it also enhances access to financial services. Financial services won't give loans to SMEs if they don't have accurate information. A robust digital ID can be used to access financial services such as loans and insurances, payments. This is critical for SMEs to scale their operations. It builds credit histories as well. Digital identity is linked to financial records. This goes a long way in helping SMEs in building credit profiles. The other thing, it promotes trust and access. Verified transactions. Digital identity systems can ensure transparency in transactions, fostering trust, between businesses and both. It reduces the informality in tax compliance. It supports capacity building and innovation. But again, all these benefits will come when the system is clean, when there is political will for the government to clean the system. It can't benefit SMEs if government still has exclusive tendencies in the system. When obtaining a national ID is more expensive than a meal, when it's the mandatory document. In Uganda, national ID is the mandatory document. Even when you use to get other documents, you have to have a national ID. Even if you have a driving permit, a passport, you can't open a bank account without a national ID. So the national ID in law in Uganda is the only document that you need to do to access any social services, which is wrong. I think which is wrong. Making it a mandatory document. So all these benefits to SMEs can be gotten if the system is clean, if there is political will to actually make it even cheaper. So for a business where you are mandated to only serve those with national IDs, yet many have no national IDs, there is a problem.
A very big problem.
Yeah.
And Alan, now that we are talking about free trade and all that, and how it will be very effective if a digital ID is put in place and it actually works. So it brings in the issue of implementation. Implementation is king. Yes. So to my next question, as we come to the tail end of this conversation, what governance frameworks and policy guidelines are necessary to ensure digital ID systems are effectively implemented? As I said earlier, implementation is king. So effectively implemented across diverse African countries, consider the continental ambition of Agenda 2063.
No, certainly the legal regulatory frameworks. Legal and regulatory frameworks such as data protection laws, interoperability standards, digital rights protection. Those are some of the things the guidelines, the framework should look at. They should look at inclusivity and accessibility, inclusive and accessible designs, universal access mandates, where you have everyone. But universal access is very important. Develop policies ensuring that digital systems are accessible to all, particularly marginalized groups, women, rural populations, okay? But lingual and cultural sensitive interfaces, the systems designs that accommodate the linguistic and cultural diversity of Africa, the African population, the governance structure, we should have a continental oversight, really. We should have established maybe an African Union digital identity task force. If that is something that we can do, an African, the task force coordinate and monitor implementation efforts across member states. We should also explore public private partnerships.
Okay, PPI.
If government can't give us a very cheap option in terms of digital ID, maybe we can partner with private parties who can actually make it cheaper and collect their money over time. I was in Nairobi and I met a company from India, and they're telling me they can give a national ID at $3 or less. If they partner with government, they can do the establishment of a systems, issue national IDs at $3. Okay, that is a big difference. If Uganda or all the other African countries can actually borrow that, that's partnering the private party to actually give a free or even less expensive service to their citizens.
We await and see if some of these things that we are talking about can be implemented, because as you said, a digital ID can be a very good thing, but if implementation is in the proper way, and also there's the issue of inclusivity. And to my last question, which is about inclusivity, is how can African countries also develop policies that ensure digital ID systems are inclusive, especially contributing to empowering women and youth across the continent, particularly in terms of access to education, healthcare, and economic opportunities? In your view, how can digital ID systems contribute to empowering women and youth across the continent, particularly in terms of access to education, healthcare, and economic opportunities?
They can. Access to education is one of those that can be leveraged on. Improved healthcare access, economic opportunities. That's what digital IDs can contribute. When you have, a clear system, access to education can't be a problem. And this is what I say. When you have a clear system, even when you make it mandatory, then when you've got that universal coverage, when you've gotten then all the universal access, when everyone can access it, it's a clean system, it's cheap to access, then access to education usually comes easily and it's automatic. Improved healthcare and access. In Uganda, I think for you to, now that's the way we're going, because for you to access health services at any government facility, you ought to give them your NIN number, national identification number, which is given to you when you register the national ID. So without it, where we're going, you won't have healthcare. The economic opportunity. And now you can't open a bank account. You can't get a loan. You can't own a SIM card if you don't have a national ID.
As I said earlier, we await to see how this scenario of the digital ID plays out. My hope that it will be more of a benefit to each and every individual who lives in this the African continent. So do you have any pattern shots as we finish this interview?
I think we need a task force. All the African Union Digital Identity Task Force to ensure and coordinate, monitor implementation efforts across, we should have a uniform. But also, as we implement digital identity systems, they are by and large by design, data centered or centric. They thrive on personal data. Can we have robust data protection laws? As of now, we have 38 countries with the data protection laws. We have 54 countries. Why aren't we having countries enact data protection laws and later on have the independent offices and enabling regulation? We still have a long way to go.
Yeah, I agree with you. We still have a long way to go, and more needs to be done on this issue when it comes to implementation. It's actually a multi-stakeholder approach that is needed for these digital ID systems to be able to work.
Thank you so much for joining us in this episode. It is our hope that you have learned so much on digital ID system, and we look forward to enlightening you more in our next episode on this issue. Asante sana. See you in the next episode.